welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And just so everyone's aware, we have pressed the record button for this. So this session is being recorded. And so today we're going to hear from 5 really great projects from the High Volume Transport Programme's TTRID portfolio, which Neil is going to introduce a little bit more shortly. And so these 5 projects are from India, Bangladesh and Nepal, and they're all focused on new thinking for tomorrow's transport. And these projects are all funded by High Volume Transport, HVT, which is a 7-year programme funded by UK Aid. I'm just going to very quickly go through some housekeeping rules before handing over to Neil to give some opening remarks. So yes, for those joining us, live transcription is available by clicking the CC or closed caption icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Presentations today have been pre-recorded, and so during those presentations, when you have questions, please do use the Q&A feature, and please just also be aware that sometimes the chat feature, which is separate to the Q&A feature, can be slightly disruptive for speakers, and people who are listening to the presentations. So please try not to use this when people are speaking, but instead use the Q&A function. And so, yeah, following this webinar, links to any videos, summaries, etc., will be shared with all attendees, and colleagues will be putting in reports and materials into the chat during the presentations of each speaker. So I'll pass over to Neil now to give some opening remarks. And so Neil is HVT's team leader, and he can talk you through the high volume transport at a general level, and also talk more specifically about TTRID in particular. Over to you, Neil.
Thank you, Sammy, and hello everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. And thank you for taking the time for joining this webinar today. So this is to talk around the TTRID outputs of research that we'll discuss in a few minutes. And it's the first of 2 webinars that we've arranged this week. The first today, obviously, and the second on Thursday. So today we will talk very much around some of the projects from Asia, and on Thursday, those from Africa. And Sammy has said, please, as we go through this, use the functions to raise any questions that you have to ensure a rich discussion. I'll just give a brief introduction to the HVT program and the TTRID call. The program, as Sammy alluded to, was launched in 2018 and is a 7-year, £18 million investment by the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, or the FCDO. And it was really to undertake research into some of the complex issues of sustainable transport development across Africa and South Asia. HVT is providing a new body of research to help inform the decisions of policymakers and planners and make road and rail transport greener, safer, more accessible, affordable, and inclusive. And through this program, what we try to do is to create an understanding for decision makers and practitioners of the issues and challenges to create sustainable and resilient transport, to build knowledge, skills, and attitudes of researchers, policymakers, and others involved in this work to make transport greener and safer. Our research leads directly and indirectly to instrumental changes in policy, program, and transport practices. And we'll hear from some of the projects today that have tried to do this with these small innovative projects. The HVT focus has very much been around focus areas of inclusion, climate change, addressing some of the crises from COVID and other stresses that we've had, while improving access and infrastructure, and ensuring that considerations around policy and planning are enabled with a research evidence base that can aid decision makers. Now, innovation is really crucial to these areas, and the TTRIT program was designed to try to address some of this. And really, it's looking at some of those transport technology related research for innovation in international development. And it builds on some of the work that goes on in the UK through a program that was initially started in the Department for Transport called TRIG, Transport Research Innovation Grants. And this was focused for us very much on international development. So since 2018, the High Volume Transport Applied Research Program has supported 3 calls. And this has funded around 40 projects. And so there's a body of research out there that has tried to address this. And what we are trying to do today is just to talk through some of the projects from the last call. So these were 9 projects that were done. 5 of them focus on Asia, 4 on Africa. And today we'll hear from 5 of the projects. And with that, I will now hand back to Sami to take us through the rest of the day. So thank you for joining us. Please raise the questions that you might have, and hopefully it is a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Neil. So yeah, now we will go through our presentations. So yeah, as mentioned, they've been pre-recorded by our researchers. And so we'll listen to each presentation and then take questions from that have come up in the Q&A function. Just to say as well, we've got a combined 15 minutes for each presentation and questions. So some presentations will have more space for Q&A than others, but our inbox will be open for any questions that come in after the webinar. So first we have Professor Deepti Jain from the Transportation Research and Injury Prevention Centre as part of the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi. So yeah, let's listen.
Hello everyone, I'm Professor Deepti Jain at Transportation Research and Injury Prevention Center, Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. Today I'll be discussing some of the major findings from our ongoing project on gender approaches for addressing adaptation capacity to hot weather conditions, supported by High Volume Transport and DT Global. Now, why this project is important? Because not only we are facing that the temperatures in the Indian cities have been rising, but also we have been facing the increased number of days when the recorded temperatures are higher. While we can restrict certain amount of travel during the hottest hours of the day, however, people are still going to travel for various purposes. This exposes them to high temperatures while traveling, leading to imposing certain health impacts. In this project, we particularly focused on women. Why? Because of their higher sensitivity and vulnerability to the rising temperatures. This is attributed to their physiological sensitivity, but also because of their differing needs for travel than men. Particularly, they are found to be more dependent on walking. Majority of the travel happens during the daytime. They have limited vehicle ownership, driving ability, and also restricted mobility choices because of various social cultural factors. Through different research, we have observed that women are likely to travel more for various purposes and mostly during the daytime. When we started the project, we were faced with certain set of questions which were emerging because of the existing myths. One of the most essential myths was that women don't travel as much as men, and which we converted into the research question to be queried: how much do women travel? The second myth was related to that women may have more choices than men in terms of adapting or changing their travel choices. This led us to identify what kind of choices do women have and are they exercising these choices. The project aims to enhance the adaptation capacity of women commuters to the hot weather conditions. The objective of this project was to assess the travel activity pattern of women, to identify which trips are adaptable, which trips are not adaptable, what are the kind of adaptations happening in existing conditions, how can we measure vulnerability and adaptability, and what and how to co-design the community and individual-led solutions. In this project, we included data collection, data analysis, focus group discussions, community engagement exercises, and lot of stakeholder workshops. Now coming to the methodology that we adopted, first we identified our target group, which was parents from selected schools of Delhi. Now why parents? Because the parents of school-going children are likely to have more interdependencies in terms of the trip purpose and in terms of the travel activity between different household members. Now, once we selected our target group, we selected our target schools. 3 schools were selected based on land surface temperature and the type of schools divided by government, public, and non-government, non-aided. In each of the schools, we invited first the interest from the parents to join the project and participate in the surveys. After mapping the locations of the parents, we could map and select neighborhoods for furthering our research. In the project, we conducted repeated surveys. One was done in March and another one was done in May 2024. From the selected neighborhoods, we also collected the street audits to understand the existing infrastructure support available in Delhi. Next, we collected and collated data from video cameras installed on the streets. And last, we also installed thermal sensors to measure thermal comfort conditions on the different streets of Delhi. In total, we approached 3 schools. From the 3 schools, we could identify 10 neighborhoods, and from each neighborhood, we selected 2 streets for furthering our research. In terms of the respondents, more responses were achieved from women as compared to men because the surveys were done at schools. In terms of the income distribution, we see that more representation is there from the lower income group. All over, we do see that between the lowest income group and other income groups, there is almost an equal distribution of population. Now I'm going to discuss some of the key findings from the project. The first finding from the project is related to the walking conditions on the streets of Delhi. For this, we measured 3 indices: green infrastructure density, shading index, and walkability index. We observed that as we move from lower hierarchy street to higher hierarchy street, we observed that the green infrastructure density tends to increase, whereas the shading index does not vary very much between the type of streets. This is likely because around the lanes, the abutting buildings are casting shades on the lanes. However, on the collector streets and sub-arterial roads, because of the presence of green infrastructure, the trees are able to cast the shades on the footpaths. However, the walking conditions between the different streets are no better. They do not support good walkability in the city. With respect to the variations in the thermal conditions measured for May, we observed that maximum temperature is recorded on the local street. And the maximum temperature can vary by up to a maximum of 7 degrees Celsius, while we could not observe any association between the street infrastructure typology and the ambient recorded temperature. This is likely because we could collect data only for limited set of streets. More data can help us in strengthening our results. Next, we procured data from the cameras installed in public spaces. This we used to map the traffic volume patterns by the time of day and for the different seasons. Taking example of 2 different typology of streets, we observed that during summers, that is season 2, pedestrians are likely to be more during the morning and the evenings as compared to the comfortable season. Whereas we do not observe any variation in the motorized two-wheeler count. The 3 modes are considered specifically for the analysis because these 3 modes are directly exposed to the ambient temperature conditions on the roads. Using our travel surveys, we could break some of the myths. First myth, which was related to women don't travel as much, we could identify that women travel more or less the same as the men. Not only that, their travel patterns are but different than men. Women majorly travel for pick-up and drop-off, for shopping and then for work. Whereas men would travel most for the work, then for pick-up and drop-off, and then for shopping. With respect to women, we could see that 63% of the women respondents in our survey walked for various purposes. Whereas 65% of the respondents, women, were traveling between 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. This is the time when the ambient temperature recorded on streets is the maximum. And on an average, they are spending 15 minutes of walking time during the daytime. Looking into the travel choice adaptation and seeing whether women are changing their travel pattern between different seasons. So first we compare the model share for men and women between two different seasons. Season 1 being comfortable season and season 2 being the hot season, the May. We could observe that the dependency of men increases on cars during the hot season and reduces on walking as compared to the comfortable season. Whereas for women, we could not observe any significant variation in the model share between two different seasons. However, we could also see that women travel more during the daytime when the temperatures are higher during the hot season as compared to the comfortable season. This is likely because the two time periods when we collected the data were one in March and another one was in May. Anybody who is familiar with the schools in India would know that we have annual school breaks scheduled during the March period. This results in lower number of trips for women during the comfortable season as compared to the hot season, when in May the schools are mostly opened. This could be further strengthened by looking into for what different purposes do women travel between different seasons and at what time of the day. As discussed earlier, we could observe that the pickup and drop-off has increased in the season 2, which is the hot season, as compared to the comfortable season. And as we know, majority of the trips happen during the daytime. With regard to the non-essential trip, the shopping trip, we observe a slight reduction in the trip share. However, the timings of the shopping trips do not change very much. Overall, we see that the majority of travel happens for women because of pickup, shopping and work in the decreasing order. Second, we observe that pickup and drop-off increases during summers as compared to comfortable weather, which is related to the school breaks. Last, we also observe that women do not have flexibility to either change their time of travel or change their mode of transport that could have resulted in reducing their travel exposures. While we are observing these challenges, we could identify certain set of solutions using the stakeholder engagements. We can opt for mitigation such that the temperatures on the streets can be reduced, or adopt solutions that can enable adaptations. These solutions can be divided into three types: individual-led, community-led, and government-led. Through various stakeholder engagements, we could see that individuals are more ready to take up the strategies like avoiding crowded places, carrying umbrella, keeping self hydrated, and choosing weather appropriate clothing. Whereas community is willing to support provisioning of drinking water, support shared responsibilities within community, and build capacity of the volunteers and the citizens. Government will also have their role to play, particularly in adopting urban design and urban street design to enable reduction of temperatures on the streets. Provisioning public infrastructure on the streets can help in better adaptations. Government can look into changing working hours, and changing school hours during the extreme weather events such that the exposure for the different user groups can be reduced. In the last, early warning systems can help people and the community to make informed decisions. This was in brief, but more can be discussed and would be happy to answer your queries.
Brilliant. Well, thanks again, Deepti, for the brilliant presentation on a really important issue that keeps growing in importance. I can see that we've got one question in the Q&A, and it says, "Thank you for the very interesting presentation. Do you think your research could be adapted to apply to other cities in the global south?"
Thanks, Sammy. So this question is very interesting, and I think this research and the methods that we have developed are replicable and scalable. But we have to see which global south cities we are looking at, and what are the temperature conditions and variations over there. Also, we need to understand specifically for the given context, what are the kinds of trip patterns, what are the kinds of adaptation capacities that women and different people belonging to different gender income would have, and accordingly devise the strategies. So while the research is replicable, but the findings may be very different between the different contexts.
Maybe in the interest of time, we'll move on. And then, yeah, oh, there's a question that's just come in. "Thank you for the great presentation and in a very interesting topic. Could you expand on the ways in which this will affect safety?"
So we have not in this research explored the impact on safety, and we are not yet sure how extreme weather events, particularly high temperatures, is affecting the safety. But one could understand that greater exposure to or prolonged exposure to high streets can lead to cognitive differences, cognitive understanding, and will impact users' behavior, where they may try to speed up or take unsafe routes. So we have to identify how the extreme weather events, particularly high temperature, is going to affect safety, which was not part of our scope of the research. But yes, would be happy to take it up with the future research.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Deepti, for the presentation and for your answers to the questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, there's one more, I think.
Oh, one more has come through.
Yeah.
So which of the possible solutions you mentioned do you think would be most effective in reducing women's vulnerability to extreme heat, given that plantings of trees would take time?
So in this project, and the uniqueness of this project was not to look into the very long-term solutions, which may take more time, but to identify how individuals and communities and what are their roles in terms of solutions, which are more short-term. So some of the strategies that we explored during various stakeholder engagements included: can we carry the some kind of a emergency kit with ourselves? For example, provisioning of water, provisioning ORS or electrolytes, carrying umbrellas. So these could be something which can be adopted by self and does not take much time to adopt. Second thing, with regard to community, we could identify that there could be certain strategies like trip sharing. So for example, when we were discussing with parents, there was a lot of interest after learning about the project from the parents that probably if we are traveling from one neighborhood to pick up the kids, why all of us have to go to the school every day to pick up the kids from the same neighborhood? Why can we not explore an option of combining the trips? So maybe one day, one time, reducing the exposure per person to the high temperatures.
Thank you, Deepti. And okay, maybe we've got time for one more question. So it's from Julie. Are the government considering altering the school holiday time to the hot period, as well as changing school hours in the summer?
So changing school hours have yet not been discussed in with the government so far, but definitely we always are preponing our holidays, summer holidays of high temperatures. So the moment heat wave is going to be there, the summer holidays are preponed. So there is definite impact on school timings in that way. But yes, changing the school hours is something which has not, during summer specifically, has not been discussed.
Thank you very much, Deepti, for the presentation and for the answers to the questions. And yeah, I'm sure Deepti will be happy to answer any other questions that people have following up after this webinar. But in the interest of time, we'll move on to the next presentation. And this will be delivered by Manisha Sharma from the Urban Catalysts.
Hello everyone, this is Manisha from the Urban Catalyst. I'll be presenting our project Safe and Secure Public Transport in Delhi. Throughout this presentation, we'll be looking at the project progress, timelines, key findings, the actions implemented on the ground, their impact, and key learnings. The aim of the project was to adopt a data-driven approach to address service gaps in public transport and enable a safer travel experience for women and girls. This was a research to implementation project. In the first phase, we collected data through primary surveys with female commuters and focus group discussion and identify the issues faced by women. Using these insights, the second phase focused on developing actionable strategies and implementation on ground. And then impact assessment was conducted. For this study, we selected a pilot route called Route 78 from Azadpur Terminal to Krishikunj. It was around 15-kilometer length and have a daily ridership of around 7,200. It also has around 51% of female ridership. The geographical landscape along this route is predominantly residential, comprises of JG cluster and resettlement colonies, which are low-income neighborhood and intersecting by the industrial areas. We conducted onboard surveys with female commuters and focus group discussions with depot manager, conductors, and bus marshals, both male and female. We found that around 77% of female commuters on this route are aged between 18 to 35. Additionally, around 65% of these women have a completed education up to 12th standard, indicating a lower education level among female commuters. Among the surveyed commuters, around 53% are regular wage or salaried employees and 19% were students. Work is the predominant travel purpose for which female commuters are traveling, followed by education. In addition to the traditional peak hours of 9 to 11 a.m. in the morning and 5 to 8 p.m. in the evening, we found that women are also traveling in the off-peak hours. Women reported that they feel more unsafe while traveling inside the e-buses as compared to while waiting at the bus stop and boarding and alighting. And the key issues identified by female commuters were the lack of real-time information on bus arrival when they're waiting at the bus stop, and the issue of e-buses halting away from the bus stops or not stopping at all at the bus stops. While traveling inside the buses, they highlighted there is an issue of overcrowding in e-buses, the lack of information on reporting mechanism to report the issue they face while traveling or using bus services. Male passengers are found to be taunting women on free bus travel scheme. Women also reported that e-bus drivers drive rashly, and they found that frontline staff are insensitive to their safety concerns. These are some of the quotes which highlight the daily experience of women. Women are so used to these comments that they now consider them part of their daily travel. Sometimes bus driver also told women that they don't want to overload the buses with free travelers, so they don't stop when female commuters are waiting at the bus stops. Delhi government has already implemented multiple initiatives for safety in buses, including helpline numbers to report the issues, Bandali applications with features of purchasing online tickets, getting real-time information, route information, and also to provide feedback on any issue regarding the bus services. And there are also panic button within e-buses. However, female commuters are found to be unaware of these initiatives. Only 2% of female commuters were aware of the One Delhi application, which was introduced in 2022, and 5% are found to be aware of the panic buttons which are available inside electric buses. So based on the issues identified, we identified the strategies with the Delhi government and implemented action on ground with their support. We identified multiple actions to improve the availability of real-time information within the buses as well as at the bus stops, increase awareness on the multiple initiatives implemented for the safety of passengers, and improve behavior of frontline staff. We also focused on how data gaps can be addressed. We facilitated the update of mobile phone application and lat long of bus stop inside the buses. This allowed female commuters or all users to access real-time information and also to take the decision of using the crowded buses based on the information available to them. We designed the stickers to be displayed in buses to increase awareness on the helpline numbers where women can report their issues with respect to the services as well as the behavior of the frontline staff. An awareness campaign was implemented on ground. On the pilot routes, we conducted workshop at college and institutes and with the membership-based organization, and also use social media for outreach and increase awareness on the initiatives implemented by the Delhi government. In the awareness campaign, we help women to understand what One Delhi application is and also help them navigate through how to use it to buy online ticket, to access the real-time information of buses, to see alternative routes available for their origin and destination, and how they can provide feedback on the services. This was the awareness workshops implemented in colleges and with membership-based organizations. The existing audio announcement, which were updated to disseminate awareness on online ticketing, safety measures, panic buttons, helpline number, and reserve seat. A pilot test was conducted in one bus and scaled up to all buses. This is the video of the updated audio announcement.
आपातकाल, यौन उत्पीड़न और चोरी जैसी आपातकालीन स्थिति में कृपया खिड़कियों के पास स्थित पैनिक बटन दबाएं। In case of emergency such as fire, health emergency, sexual assault and theft, please press the panic button located near the windows. बस सेवाओं में किसी भी समस्या के मामले में हेल्पलाइन नंबर 1800-118-181 या वन दिल्ली एप्लीकेशन का उपयोग करें। In case of any issue in bus services, use the helpline number 1800-118-181 or One Delhi application. कृपया जेब कतरों से सावधान रहें। Please beware of pickpocketers. यात्री सीटों के पीछे उपलब्ध QR कोड को स्कैन करके ऑनलाइन टिकट खरीद सकते हैं। Passengers can now buy tickets online by scanning the QR code available behind the seats. कृपया महिलाओं की सीट पर पुरुष न बैठे। Men should not sit on seats reserved for women. घूरना, ताने मारना और छेड़छाड़ करना भारतीय कानून के अनुसार दंडनीय अपराध है। ऐसी स्थिति में बस अधिकारी से मदद लें। Staring, commenting and molesting is a punishable offence as per Indian law. In such a situation, seek help from the conductor or bus marshal. आपातकाल
We conducted gender sensitization trainings with drivers and conductors, and where we had identified the issues and we let conductors to take the initiatives and tell us that how they can help to resolve the issues. They also took a pledge to ensure the safety of female passenger inside the buses. Because there is a lot of issues of buses not stopping at the bus stop, we identified that how technology can be used to address that issue. So that can be resolved from the geofencing of bus stops of around 30 meter to 60 meter. The criteria would be that bus must sustain a speed of 0 km/h for average dwell time observed for during that time of the day, peak hour or off-peak hour. If the bus doesn't stop, a notification will be sent to the bus management system at the depot level. To identify the data gaps, first we map the different sources of public transport ticketing systems in Delhi and what kind of data they collect. We found that gender disaggregated data is predominantly collected on the pre-printed tickets as well as on the One Delhi or mobile phone applications, but it was not collected in other modes. And based on the existing framework, we developed a framework for gender disaggregated data collection through ticketing system. We identified that how gender disaggregated and age disaggregated data can be collected by using electronic ticketing machines from mobile phone application, either metro or closed loop cards, and also through the open loop card. Currently in Delhi as well as at the nation level, National Common Mobility Card is being introduced. So we identified that data by enabling data sharing between the service provider, age and gender data can be collected. And this framework can be adopted by any state transport undertaking in India based on their ticketing framework currently at the time. The collected data can be used for multiple purposes. First, the bus stops with higher share of female commuters can be identified to, one, improve the last mile connectivity services, and also to prioritize safe, accessible pedestrian infrastructure to improve last mile connectivity. And also safety initiatives could be implemented on the identified bus stops with higher female commuters. Boarding and alighting data can also be used to facilitate the services like SOS button, CCTV cameras, and also to provide more information on the existing initiatives implemented. Route-wise travel details that would be available can be used to either provide additional services, which could be through regular, midi, or buses during the peak hour to prevent overcrowding. Frequent point-to-point services or women priority or women-only bus services can also be provided depending on the travel behavior and destination. At the depot level, deployment of female conductors and drivers can also be prioritized on the routes with more female passengers. And also longer dwell times can be adopted if there is a higher share of senior citizens and some bus stops. After implementing this initiative, we also conducted an end-line assessment to understand the impact of the initiatives implemented on the ground. These have been identified from the awareness of existing initiative, feedback registered by female commuters through helpline number or online One Delhi applications, and also online tickets bought by female commuters. We found that the awareness on the DTC helpline number increased from 10% at the baseline to 35% during the endline assessment. On the awareness of One Delhi application, we see a substantial increase from 2% at the baseline to 63% during the endline assessment. And similar results have been observed for the panic button as well. When we looked at the online ticketing and feedback registered, we found that the complaints or the feedback registered by female commuters at the pilot depot has increased from 19% at the baseline to 22% at the endline assessment. And we also see a slight increase in the online purchase of tickets by female commuters. So the key learnings from the project was that affordable, safe, secure, and reliable public transport systems can enable women to access education and work opportunities and also improve ridership of public bus services. Collection and analysis of gender disaggregated ticketing data is required in order to create safe and secure and reliable public transport journeys, which can also be supplemented by perception surveys. We have to develop an integrated approach to improve travel experience of women and girls. And there is a possibility that resource-poor women may have limited access to digital technologies. So a partnership can be done with women's organizations, colleges, schools to increase awareness among women and girls on the initiatives implemented for their safety while using bus services. And at last, the gender disaggregated impact evaluation should be conducted to assess the effectiveness of the implemented strategies on ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manisha, for a great presentation. We've had a couple of questions in the Q&A. One was from our colleagues at LMICs in Lagos, who asked if the presentation can be shared at the end of at the end of this so that it can guide their implementation in Lagos. So that's something positive that's come out of this presentation. Just having a look, I think we had another question. Oh, from Jonathan. Manisha, how easy was it to get things like the panic buttons, announcements, and stickers accepted by the bus operators? What did you have to do? Will this be scaled up to other bus service routes, other bus services and routes in the city?
Hi, Sami. Thank you for the question. So I think we had to follow the hierarchical process of government organization, and we had to get it approved at multiple levels, including the manager, director, and the Delhi Transport Corporation. So there were multiple things that had been done, but it was not done on a pilot basis. Once it was approved, it was got displayed in all the 1,200 electric buses that are there in Delhi.
Another question. Could you please share some details of your training workshops with bus personnel in Delhi?
Sure. So we had conducted these gender sensitization trainings with, there are 3 types of bus personnel in Delhi: drivers, conductors, as well as bus marshals, which are being deployed in all Delhi buses for the safety of women passengers. So we did gender sensitization trainings with them, and the goal of the training was to, one, make them break their biases, that because a lot of these people have bias that women only travel for the recreational purposes, and the purpose they travel is not as important as men travel, which is work. So one was that. Second is to make them understand that what type of issues women are facing, and third is they by themselves were aware of what can be done to resolve those issues. So we just prompted them that how they in their day-to-day life can resolve this issue without having to get involved in a physical fight or anything, that how non-confrontational ways can be utilized to resolve these issues. So that was the whole purpose of these workshops.
Final question from Sanjeev. Great presentation. Do you think it could be scalable to other non-electric buses in Delhi? What could be the challenges?
I think yes, it can be scalable to the other cities with non-electric buses as well, because it's more about how data can be utilized to improve bus services. So, for example, providing real-time information, as well as avenues to provide feedback on how bus services can be improved from the commuters, can be improved and can also be taken in other cities. We took electric buses because currently India is in the process of transition its fleet from, especially in Delhi, CNG to electric buses. So we also wanted to look at the bus designs and how commuters are what commuters are feeling about these electric buses. So that was the reason, but it is scalable to the other cities which do not have electric buses.
I believe we had one more question, which I've now lost, but I think it was, oh yes, did you find that the male bus workers were open to the suggestions that your project made?
Yeah, so one of the interested findings that we had through this workshop is that male commuters were aware of these issues, but it's that they don't consider that it's part of their job because they are so much involved in providing the tickets. So one was to aware them that this also constitute part of their jobs, and apparently the solutions that we provided were given by them only, that how if faced that situation, they would act in that situation. And it was also peer learning where senior conductors gave their understanding of the field as well, how those can be resolved. So they were more adopted, but they also said that earlier they were not aware that it's their part of the job. So that was positively taken by them.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
Thank you for the great presentation and the great responses to the questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Manisha. Okay, so up next, we have the policy and regulation development for motorcycle taxi safety in Nepal research project. And this was led by Jonathan Flower, Dr. Prasanna Lama, and Julie Mitten from UWE and the Nepal Injury Research Centre. And I believe Prasanna is going to, we're going to hear from Prasanna.
Namaste, I'm Dr. Prasanna Lama. I work as a researcher at Nepal Injury Research Centre, a collaboration between University of West of England, UK and Kathmandu Medical College, Nepal. I want to take a few moments of your time to describe project, outline key insights, and explain impacts that have been made so far. The term motorcycle taxi is used to describe two-wheel motorcycles used to transport fare-paying passengers, generally facilitated by a ride-hailing app in a mobile phone. 43% of road traffic crash involves motorcycles. In Southeast Asia, there are 1.5 million motorcycles registered in Kathmandu Valley and 190,000 motorcycles are used as taxis. In Nepal, does not have any national regulations authorizing development of motorcycle taxi operations, but ride-hailing app services started in 2017 in response to consumer demand. The Ministry of Physical Infrastructure and Transport have drafted motorcycle taxi regulations, but it has yet to be enacted. Our project aims to understand where the motorcycle taxi fits in the public transport in Nepal and to identify the ways to improve the safety. For this, we have 4 targeted objectives. For objective 1, interviews were taken with and held focus group discussions with riders and passengers for better understanding of the motorcycle taxi operations in Nepal. For second objective, an analysis of police and media crash reports to illustrate the safety risk. For third objective, we undertook a systematic literature review to identify potential changes in policy and regulation that could improve safety for riders and passengers. Another project funded by National Institute of Health Research, which will be published as a safer public transport guide, it will include the findings of the motorcycle taxi and other aspects of public transport. Looking into the objectives in turn, 7 themes emerged from the data analysis covering passenger and riders' behavior, personal and physical safety, technology, legislation, and infrastructure issues. Process map was developed which helped to identify challenges in the current way the motorcycle taxi operates in Nepal. Here are the steps of the motorcycle taxi operations. This process map was used in the workshop to discuss with stakeholders which identified the challenges and solutions in the qualitative research. Our methods involved looking into the traffic police and national media. Nepal Traffic Police started to disaggregate motorcycle taxi crash data from 2021, so we requested to assess data from 3 years, that is 2021-2024. Over 3 years, the proportion of recorded crash has fallen, perhaps because the police have introduced random breath testing and CCTV surveillance. This is a subset of motorcycle crashes identified as taxis. Over 3 years, there are 5 deaths, 115 reported injured from 87 crashes, motorcycle taxi crashes. The operator companies' data suggests far greater number of crashes. Motorcycle taxi crashes recorded by the police is significantly underestimated. We try to validate the police data against the second source, so we searched motorcycle taxi crashes reported in the national newspaper, that is Himalayan Times, and it identified 102 reports of two-wheelers, but no motorcycle taxi crashes were reported over 3 years. 4 project outcomes relate to the risk of using motorcycle taxis. Nepal police are systematically recording motorcycle taxi crashes, which will help to raise the visibility of the issue. Operators discuss collaboration on issues for rider and passenger safety. Informal riders peer support group has been strengthened to encourage safer riding and to provide mutual support. And passenger advisory group was created that grew into formal user group. Operators, riders, and passengers speaking with a common voice makes a compelling case for action to be taken by regulators to formalize the sector. We saw 3 databases from studies that involved people in low and middle income countries that used or regulated two-wheeler as taxis and reported risk factors associated on their journey, or managed or regulated the motorcycle taxi system. Screening identified 25 papers that met our inclusion criteria. Studies explore the association between risk factors for crashes and injuries of motorcycle taxi riders. Common risk factors include not following traffic rules, distracted driving, not wearing a helmet or wearing a poor-fitting helmet, and less driving experience. 4 papers identified interventions like Safe Water Program in Uganda. The riders in this program are likely to wear a helmet and less likely to involve in crash, but none of the included studies reported policies or regulatory changes to improve motorcycle taxi that have been formally evaluated. Stakeholders that took part in the final project dissemination event helped to shape 12 recommendations for operators and regulators, which will be helpful in finalizing the draft two-wheeler regulations prepared by Ministry of Physical Infrastructure and Transport 2023. Regulators, operators, riders, and passengers recognize the need for safer and more formalized motorcycle taxi operations in Nepal. There is a groundswell of support from riders and passengers for the 12 recommendations that have been developed for stakeholder action. In conclusion, operators, regulators, riders, passengers, traffic police, insurance companies have shared a role in improving the motorcycle taxi safety in Nepal. Police records significantly underestimate the number of motorcycle taxi crashes because there is no register of the riders and their vehicles are not visibly different from other motorcycles. Motorcycle taxi crashes are rarely reported in the media, and when they have been motorcycle taxis never mentioned, and which means that the public may not be aware of the risk associated with traveling on an MCT. There is limited evidence to support the development of safer motorcycle taxi system in low and middle income countries. The 12 recommendations agreed by the stakeholders in the final dissemination event could serve to build a practical action plan for improving motorcycle taxi operations in Nepal, which will enhance rider and passenger safety while ensuring the operations to be commercially viable for operators.
Thank you, Prasanna, for the great presentation. We'll just wait to see if any Q&A comes up in the question and answer function. But yeah, maybe one question I had that you might be happy to answer is, so what are the next steps with the 12 recommendations? Because I know that you've been having some good engagement with the relevant ministry in Nepal. So yeah, it'd be great to hear a bit more about that.
The next step of my project is to conduct an online survey with 100 riders and 100 passengers through a software, Qualtrics software, and to if the two-wheeler directive, it is when to be finalized, we do not know. So I have to go to Ministry of Physical Infrastructure and Transport and ask Sunil Shrestha when it will be finalized. And also I will take suggestions from the riders and passengers, as we have riders peer support group and passenger advisory group. So taking suggestions from them also, and from the findings from the online survey also, I will gather all the findings and have a discussion with MOPIT.
Yeah, just to add to what Prasanna said, the ministry has said that if they had demonstration of a groundswell of support from the riders and passengers and operators, that would be a prompt to them for a quicker publishing of the regulations that have been drafted. So we have a bit of extra funding until next March, which will help us do that survey that Prasanna mentioned, to help build that evidence base.
That's great. Thanks both. It's been really great to see that you've been able to continue the great, or help disseminate and bring to the next stage the research that you were able to do under TTRID with some additional funding. A couple of questions in the chat. So one is, what is the most important recommendation for improving safety? The one thing that you think needs to change? Tough question.
There should be data sharing among the operators, like riders. They sometimes they are offline, and then offline when their riders are offline, they take high price from the passengers. So this information is not in the ride sharing app. So the offline rider should not be in practice. And on online riders also have issues, like sometimes passengers they have overloading. They are more than two passengers, and sometimes they use luggages. So there should be a notification in the app while using online app by the riders. And
yeah, just for context on the data sharing between operators, the riders typically ride for many different operators. So if you implement something like limiting the time that riders are allowed to ride each day, currently there's no way of actually determining that, because you could limit how much they ride for one operator and then they could just switch apps and ride for another operator. But by sharing data, that would help actually limit things like the time riders are riding each day. And we could have said a simple answer, like in response to that question, like wearing crash helmets, which is only about 2% of the pillion riders, the passengers, wear crash helmets on motorcycles generally in Nepal. But it's a complex issue anywhere, but in Nepal particularly, where there's no current way of determining whether a helmet is actually a genuine helmet or whether it's a fake with a kite mark. And so there are a lot of systemic issues that need to be addressed to make helmet wearing both practical and also a safety feature.
And do you think, did you get the sense from your focus group discussions and engagements that riders and operators would be open to things like greater data sharing, just given that, from a rider's perspective, that's something that could affect their income if there's limits on the amount of hours they can drive for?
Operators came together for the first time in some of our stakeholder meetings. Obviously, they're competitors and were reluctant initially to come together, but they did come together and found it useful and found that they've got mutual benefit by improving the system and regulating the system, so it's something that's recognises and has a formal status in the country. So collaborating on things of mutual benefit is in their interests. So data sharing that they were up for. Yes, on that particular issue, it would be more challenging for the riders, but the riders are concerned to improve their well-being, and so I think if it was part of a raft of measures, they would be more prepared to accept that.
Great. Another question, how well do you think any of these recommendations will be enforced if introduced?
The police were a key stakeholder in the traffic police and very cooperative in the project. I think from their perspective, they can't have lots of additional things to do. So I think for them it was a matter of prioritizing and looking at collectively at what are the most effective measures for them to be looking out for. So from the side of enforcement, from the police, they are prepared to get on board on these issues as long as their workload doesn't change. And in terms of operators, the operators, if we look at it in the round, they're prepared to take on measures that improve the welfare of passengers and their riders. Looking after their riders makes economic sense to them, but they want the overall scheme to still be commercially viable. So we were keen to make that one of the objectives as well.
We've got one more question. In Lagos, we are discouraging the use of motorcycles as a mode of public transport. However, it has been adopted as a courier service. The problem with Lagos riders is the behaviour and attitude and lack of safety standards. So any thoughts on that? Any reflections?
I wouldn't say it was dissimilar. It's not something that's been promoted in the past, hence this sort of grey area that motorcycle taxis have in Kathmandu. But I think just the fact that so many people use them, over 70%, 79% of vehicles in the Kathmandu Valley are motorized two-wheelers. They're just the main. By default, they've become the main form of public transport in Kathmandu. So I think everyone's taken a pragmatic view that it's better to make them safe and regulated than to ignore their existence because they're so prevalent.
Well, yeah, okay. In the interest of time, I think we'll move on. But thank you very much, Prasanna and Jonathan, for the presentation and for your answers to the questions. It's very interesting. Okay, so the next project we're going to hear from is the Freight Emissions Index for the Heritage City of Ahmedabad. And the presentation is going to be delivered by Jaya from the Urban Lab Foundation.
Hello. Today, we'll talk about the Freight Emission Index for Ahmedabad's walled city. So coming to the presentation, it is divided into three parts. The research background, where we will explore the study's need, methodology, and framework development, and also the detailed assessment of how the index was developed, including the parameters considered, and finally, how this index can be used as a decision-making tool for the walled city of Ahmedabad. So coming to the research background, so let's just start with the research data. So looking at the national level, 71% of the freight moves by road. Also, 90% of the road freight vehicles use diesel as the main fuel, and trucks run empty 28% of the time on longer trips and 43% on the shorter trips. But why focus on freight emissions? So freight is crucial to national development, contributing to 32% to GDP growth from the year 2015 to 2020. With the road freight growing by 28%. So by the year of 2050, this is expected to double if the current trends continue. So our main aim was to develop a scalable methodology and a tool to capture and measure freight emissions efficiency. The emission measurement is based on the Global Logistics Emission Council framework, also called as the GLEC framework, accredited by Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is widely used by the logistic industries to calculate emissions. So the GLEC categorizes emissions into three categories. As you can see here, Scope 1 covers direct emissions from owned assets. Scope 2 accounts for indirect emissions from the purchased electricity or steam. And the Scope 3 includes emissions from transportation within the supply chain. So calculating the Scope 3 emissions, we require ton-kilometer data, emission intensity factors, and greenhouse gas conversion metrics. So now let's talk about the case area, that is Ahmedabad's walled city, which covers 8.1 square kilometers with a population of 4 lakhs and sees around 23,500 freight vehicles daily. But why focus on the walled city and not the entire city of Ahmedabad? So the walled city has a dense, heritage-rich built form with high economic activity, making it an ideal focus for emission reduction. Also, the walled city has about 60 commodities, but perishables, electronics, and textiles make up to more than 55% of the total commercial activity. So the map here depicts how the markets for these commodities are fragmented or consolidated. So next we'll look at how the freight emission index was developed. So the two key parameters which were considered are, one is the vehicular characteristics, including fuel type, engine type, and vehicle age. And for operational characteristics, whether load factor, empty runs, and the time spent in congestion. So we extracted emission data focusing on greenhouse gases, but due to data availability, the index emphasizes only on the carbon monoxide emissions. So coming to the index building, the first step was to correlate the vehicular characteristics such as age, fuel type, and engine type to determine the per unit change in CO densities for the same. So the step 2 was to correlate the operational characteristics, and from the secondary sources, we understood the combined correlated impact of load factor and empty run on carbon emissions. And also we understood that the overloading and underloading both increases vehicular emissions. So the last step was to assess the impact of congestion. So through the expert interviews, we got to know that the effect of the time spent in congestion on vehicle emissions is maximum 10%. And as per the vehicle's time spent in congestion, proportionate values were assigned. So finally, we combined the CO density values for vehicle and operational characteristics to calculate the index score for each vehicle and commodity. So it is very important to understand here that this score provides insights into emission efficiency rather than the actual on-ground emissions. So now let's explore how to use the index as a decision-making tool. The index score indicates the performance. So higher the score means better efficiency and lower carbon emissions. For instance, if you see here, perishables score the highest, reflecting good vehicle quality and efficient operations. So let's just break down the vehicular characteristics as we have already discussed before. That is fuel type, engine type, and vehicle age. So looking at the fuel type, CNG and diesel are equally used for perishables, mainly due to the CNG fueled auto rickshaws. And for electronics, 90% of the vehicles are diesel powered LCVs, that is light commercial vehicles. So in terms of engine type, freight for perishables use 54% BS6 engines, which are cleaner, But in the case of electronics, however, they rely on 60% BS3 engines, which are older and more polluting. For vehicle age, 67% of vehicles transporting perishables are less than 4-year-old. And in contrast, 55% of vehicles used for electronics are about 5 to 9 years old, which lowers their score. So now let's look at operational characteristics, that is load factor, empty runs, and time spent in congestion. So the vehicles in all markets generally maintain an optimal load factor, which results in contributing to higher scores. But in case of empty runs, freight vehicles in the study area are observed to do an empty run after delivering the goods. And this happens with all the vehicles of different commodities. This is reflected in the lower scores. Coming to the time in congestion, despite of shorter distances in the walled city, narrow roads and limited right of way lead to significant time spent in congestion. So the freight emission index helps set emission reduction targets. So the strategies include revising vehicle scrappage policies, incentivizing cleaner fuels, improving load factors through design innovation, and reducing empty runs through technology and market aggregation, as you can see here. And finally, to summarize, we can conclude that both vehicular and operational characteristics have impact on emissions, which is represented in the index through combining the effect of both and understanding the emission efficiency of freight vehicles. And importantly, commodities have varied emission scores. The variation is predominantly an effect to the following factors like market aggregation, time of operations, material sensitivity, vehicle type, and dead trips.
Thank you, Jaya, for the great presentation there. We'll see if we get any questions in the chat. But one I had was, so why do you think that certain sectors, so for example, textiles, tend to use older vehicles that are older and worse performing, and then what kind of incentives could be introduced to help them move to cleaner fuels?
Yeah, so what happens is, so all these transporters in the old city, specifically for textiles and electronics, they are individual transporters. They are not part of any organization or a big transport agency. So they use their own vehicles, which are quite older. They buy them second hand, third hand, and that's why they are more diesel and more older vehicles. So what we can do to make them better is that for a short term solution, we tried seeing that if they could be retrofitted with CNG systems, so they can transfer from diesel to CNG fuels in a very less cost. And for a long-term intervention, we like talk to the authorities and all to discuss the possibilities of giving some incentives to shift them to electric vehicles. They're giving some cross subsidies or some scheme from the government itself, which can help them to transfer to cleaner fuels and also give them some guidance on charging and better emissions, how they can reduce it from getting better fuels or making less empty runs or getting good load factors, something like that.
That's great. Thank you, Avril. We've got two questions from Jonathan and Deepti, which are somewhat related, so I'll read them both together. So Jonathan's question is, can't the use of stop-start technology for ICE engines and EVs stop additional emissions in congestion? And was this taken into account in the emissions index? And then the second question, Deepti, was asking, so what are the new emerging modes of transport being used for freight transport? How are they changing the freight emissions in the walled city?
Yeah, so to answer the first question, so what because if the vehicles are old, as we discussed in the last question, so there is a very low chance that they have start-stop technology inbuilt in them. And as we saw in the presentation, there are more than 25,000 vehicles in the walled city each day, and most of them lie in this category. So implementing a solution like this, retrofitting each vehicle with such a small start-stop implementation part is a little bit difficult, but it surely can be tried out and be seen if it's possible, and maybe a phasing plan can be developed to implement this. And the second question, the newer trends for modes. So right now, a lot of e-auto rickshaws have been started, uh, which travel transport freight in the world city. So it's a very emerging uh, mode, but and we didn't see a lot of those vehicles, but they have been implemented in the perishables commodity, which we can see, but not in the electronics and textiles uh, commodities.
That's great. Thank you, Avril. And I think in the interest of time, we're going to have to move on to the next presentation. But thank you very much to both of you for the presentation and your answers to the questions. Okay, our fifth and final presentation today is on road design guidelines for three-wheeler slow-moving vehicles for urban and rural roads of Bangladesh. And the presentation is delivered by Dr. Nazmus Saqib from the Islamic University of Technology.
Hello everyone, hope you are all doing well. My name is Dr. Nazmus Saqib. I am an associate professor at Islamic University of Technology in Bangladesh. We have recently concluded our project, which is called Technical Recommendations for Road Design Guidelines Considering Three-Wheeler Slow-Moving Vehicles for Urban and Rural Roads in Bangladesh. Quite a long title. So we shortened it to Road Design for Three-Wheelers. And as the title suggests, we are going to be talking about how we are going to adjust the road designs to accommodate three-wheeler vehicles, slow-moving three-wheeler vehicles, which are very critical for our mobility services. So three-wheeler vehicles are quite common in global south, in Asian and African countries. They are very sustainable mobility for our different aspects. For example, geographically, it's a critical transportation modality because, as you know, in Bangladesh, we have floods, we have rainfalls. So this kind of environment doesn't really suit these regular cars which get flooded very quickly. So as you can see in this picture, the rickshaws, the three-wheelers have a very high clearance, so they can be easily adapted for these geographical locations. In addition, the roads or the condition of the roads are not as good, so these vehicles adapt very nicely for those kind of situations. Economically, as you can see, these vehicles are made, constructed locally with very little imported material, so they have very good economic benefits, especially people who are make a living out of this driving these vehicles, so they can afford it. And also the passengers, the lower middle income people who go for regular commute, they can easily use these vehicles as a taxi service. Environmentally is also a very good considerations, considering it doesn't emit anything. Actually, we had a minister who actually called these are Teslas of Bangladesh. So it taken to a bit of salt, but this is actually true that we had this sustainability when at the beginning we had pedal driven. Now some of them are battery driven. At no point we are not using the regular motor driven three wheelers as frequently, though they are quite present in several countries in this region. So these are actually very sustainable and supportive to our mobility. Then actually we found that about 80% of urban trips, the person trips, are done on three-wheelers. But obviously the roads that we design, the manuals we use are mostly designed for these regular cars or sometimes oversized vehicles, but never for these three-wheelers. As you can see in this picture, they are the main transit option for these urban roads. So we need to consider those factors when you're designing the road. That's the real premise of this project. Then we also understand these three-wheelers are very slow. People who are habituated with faster vehicles do not like them as much. They have safety issues. There are no seat belts. People are driving it, so there's concerns there, and these drivers are not as well trained. So we understand there are safety concerns over there, and when it comes to a mixed traffic condition. For example, when we bring in other vehicles, bigger vehicles, faster vehicles in there, they create a conflict in during this operation. So obviously there's no protection and no proper braking and maneuvering mechanism. And that's a story for another day. We do need to improve their design. We need to make them safer. But for the project itself, the scope of the project was, we are not trying to promote or discourage three-wheelers, but we can accept they are here for a while. So we want to make it a safer experience from the road design perspective, so that they can operate safely for the time being. Then we have different type of three-wheelers. So because they are indigenously made, their structures, their driving capacity, their operating modality are quite varying. For example, there are three to four types of three-wheelers that we commonly see. We see rickshaws, we see battery operated rickshaws, which actually essentially battery mounted on the back of this rickshaw. We have seen easy bikes. I'll go to these pictures a little bit later. And then we see vans. Vans does seem like a car, but it's not. It's not actually a rickshaw, three-wheeler on with a flatbed. So they are used for carrying goods. So these are the common types of three-wheeler that we see here in Bangladesh. Then we have the rickshaw, which is a icon for Bangladesh, which is a pedal-driven three-wheeler. Then a engine is mounted in the back, a battery is put in the somewhere in the on board, and then we have this battery operated rickshaws, and obviously they can run quite fast, like 35 km per hour is quite normal for them. So as you can see from their wheels and their driving steering, they are not really suitable for that kind of speed. So that is a recent very concerning for the time being. So the battery operated rickshaws looking from the back. Then we have the easy bikes, which, as you can see, has more robust mechanism per se. We had smaller wheels, wider wheels. We have some electronic brakes. So they are a little bit safer in that regard. So these we call easy bikes. I don't know where these terms are coming from, but that's what we are colloquially known. There's a different format of easy bikes with a nicer shades and seating mechanism. Then what we see here is called vans locally, which are actually based on the same chassis. So for the project, what we try to do, we try to find out what are the concerns that people have for these three-wheelers. We did driver survey, user survey. We conducted statistical analysis. We conducted field measurements. We tried to figure out what the speed they're moving, how the accelerations and driving behavior is looking like, and then we made some recommendations. So these are the steps that we followed for this project. We interviewed, we set motion sensors in the three-wheelers, and we evaluated these speed bumps, how they are responding to the speed bumps. Also, we integrated the observations to make a recommendation. So these are the part of the survey. We did pilot survey, interviewed drivers, interviewed passengers, and we did online survey as well to get remote participants. And we went to the workshops where actually mechanic shops, so where they actually gave some good opinions about the accidents that usually they see day to day. Then we figured out the speed bumps was one of the major concerns, steep slopes, narrow roads, uneven manholes. Those are the things that bothers the driver most. This is discomfort for the drivers. Then we evaluated the discomfort for the users as well. Where you can see the presence of high-speed vehicles ranks quite high in their opinion, apart from the speed bumps and uneven roads. So we figured out what is not comfortable during their experience. But as far as the risk concerned, what actually causes an accident, we figured out what the hazards driver identifying. They identified open drains, reckless driving, and competition with high-speed vehicles as a prime causes of these accidents. Then we did the same for users who identified the sharp turns and narrow road as one of the bigger issues. Uneven road surface and waterlogged road were another issues that came up during this survey. Then we moved on to the speed profiles. We try to figure out how fast these vehicles are moving, how much time is taking for these brakes to work, how much time they're taking for the braking, also the accelerations type, because these patterns are important when you're designing a road, like stopping side distance, when you're making intersection yellow clearance time, how much time they need to clear that intersection. So those kind of things actually need this information. We try to plug in that gap through our study. What we see here, we see brake times for these three vehicles, brake times with the softer brakes, braking distance with hard brakes, braking distance with soft brakes, also the speeds of these vehicles. Then we figured out what the speed of these vehicles look like, how they actually accelerate and maintain their speed, and these are part of the study that we have been doing. But eventually we came into a conclusion where we figured out what are the recommendations should be for improving the designs. We found that the lane widths are actually one of the issues that were actually there is a conflict when, because the three-wheelers are slow moving vehicles, when cars want to overtake them, that creates a conflict. So what we suggested, just like cycle lanes, let's make some lanes dedicated for this kind of three-wheelers. So also in places where we cannot provide additional lane, where we should provide their capacity, we should improve the capacity of the shoulder so that these vehicles can move on to the shoulders and operate safely in case of emergencies. Then I move to slope and ramp adjustment, because when we have a slope, because it's manually driven or battery driven, they are quite slow to ride that slope. Also, there is a control issues. So what we recommended, the upslope should not be exceed 3 to 4%, while longer slopes should be limited to 2 to 3%. So we need to consider that when we're designing the urban upslope conditions. We identified the speed bumps as one of the major concerns. So we figured out there should be a design for speed bumps which is suitable for this kind of three-wheelers, because three-wheelers does not need speed bumps for the speed control. Speed bumps are designed for faster moving vehicles, but the speed bumps are actually harming these three-wheeler vehicle passengers and users, because they don't have a suspension. So that's causing the problem for them. So that's one of the stronger recommendations that we made for three-wheelers. Then we consider safety barriers. Safety barriers currently we are using bollard style. Bollard style has a gap between them, but they cannot actually protect these three-wheelers. So what we are recommending is a continuous type of barrier for these regards. Then we suggested some new signs and signals which should be dedicated for three-wheeler operations, which concerns three-wheelers. For example, we see stability issues, we see rough roads, we see speed limits. We are also offering a dedicated rickshaw green, so that they can have a time advantage to cross that intersection for easier operation of that intersection. We can identify them electric three-wheeler charging stations. So these are the new types of signs that we can introduce to our urban areas. So that's all from me now. Thank you for listening. I hope you appreciate our work here, and we hope that we can improve our service to the community by making these three-wheelers safe, and also support the mobility of the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sakib, for the really interesting presentation. I realised I've done quite a poor job of keeping to time, and we're already over the 11:30 cut-off time. But if anyone has any questions they'd like to put in the Q&A, we'll see if we can, if Sakib is able to answer them quickly. Oh, we've got a good question here. Great presentation. Have you considered driver education?
That's a great question, actually. So what we are actually observing the field situation. The project for this one didn't actually involve that much knowledge distribution, but obviously education is a huge behemoth to move. So we actually limited ourselves just to observe at this point, but obviously driver education and actually the change of the vehicle type will definitely improve, but it's a very expensive and quite a large task to deal with. Thank you.
And then a question from Jonathan: how quickly are the electric freewheelers replacing other powered freewheelers?
I would take this question just a little bit, because what we are seeing is it's replacing very fast. The electric three-wheelers are taking over in almost all parts of Bangladesh, I believe in other parts too. And some are doing like solar-based electrification. Some, as I said, like some people say the Teslas of Bangladesh. So these are taking over very quickly.
I'm conscious that we're over 7 minutes over time. Maybe we'll have to leave it there. But I think if I can speak on behalf of the researchers who have published today, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any questions. If you do get in contact with HVT, we can put you in touch. And in the chat function, Helen is putting lots of links to a lot of the projects that we've heard from today. Helen's also put a link in about providing feedback. We'd all really appreciate it if you could take just 1 minute to provide a little bit of feedback on that form. And I think on the next slide, there's a QR code if you want to quickly scan it. So that's there if you want to quickly do that. So you can just easily do that on your phone. It shouldn't take more than 1 minute. So thank you in advance for doing that. But thank you very much to all of our presenters today. I'm sure you'll agree it was a really interesting webinar where I certainly learned a lot, and hopefully other people did too. Like I said, Helen shared lots of links in the chat where you'll be able to read more about the projects, and you'll be able to find more research done by HVT on our website as well. So please do visit that, as it's got lots of content there on research carried out by High Volume Transport. But thank you very much again. And I think this is where we'll close. Thank you.